What happened when a childhood memory turned out to be a lie? I never thought one memory could ruin everything I believed about my family, but that's exactly what happened. For as long as I could remember, my favorite childhood story was about the summer we went to the lake. I was 7. My mom told it so many times it felt carved into me, like a tattoo. She'd say, "That was the day you saved your cousin Daniel's life." And I'd smile, even though I barely remembered it myself. According to her version, Daniel had slipped from the dock, flailing in the water. I jumped in without hesitation, dragging him toward the shallow end until the adults reached us. Everyone clapped. My dad lifted me in the air like I was a hero. "Bravery runs in the blood," he said. For years, that story was the foundation of who I was. I was the kid who saved someone, the cousin who became the family hero before losing his baby teeth. But memory is a fragile thing. The first crack appeared at a family barbecue this past spring. Daniel, now 25, tall and awkward, laughed when Mom started telling the story again. "You know that's not how it happened, right?" he said, wiping barbecue sauce from his chin. The silence was instant. My fork clattered against the plate. "What do you mean?" I asked. Daniel glanced at my parents, then back at me. His smile faltered. "I wasn't drowning. You were." The table erupted in nervous laughter, but my stomach flipped. "That's not funny," I whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I'm serious. You slipped, you hit your head on the dock, I pulled you out. Aunt Linda wrapped you in a towel while you kept crying about not being able to breathe." His voice carried none of the ceremony my mom's version always had, just matter-of-fact truth. I looked at my mother, searching her face for reassurance, for confirmation that Daniel was just messing with me. But she was staring at her plate, her fork moving in tight, repetitive circles. "Sweetheart," Dad finally said, clearing his throat. "You know how kids remember things differently. Don't let him confuse you." But Daniel wasn't joking. His eyes were locked on mine, and in them, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Pity. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the fragments of the memory I actually had. The water was cold. The sunlight turned everything white. My chest had burned like fire. And hands. Yes, I remembered hands under my arms pulling me up. But were they mine reaching for Daniel, or his saving me? The more I thought about it, the more the memory dissolved like sugar in hot tea. What if my entire identity, the brave kid who saved someone, was built on a lie? I confronted Mom the next morning. She was making coffee, her back to me. "Why would Daniel say that?" I asked. My voice shook. Her spoon froze mid-stir. Then she sighed, slow and heavy. "Because he doesn't understand. We told the story the way we did because you needed it." I needed a lie? She turned then, her eyes tired. "You were a weak child, always afraid of everything. The lake story gave you courage. It gave you something to hold on to." The words landed like stones. "So it's true. I didn't save him. He saved me." Mom pressed her lips together. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again, but then she simply whispered, "Yes." Something inside me cracked. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. "You let me believe it for 20 years?" I whispered. Her expression hardened. "We did what was best for you." I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the chair. Best for me. The phrase echoed in my skull like poison. I left the house before Dad woke up, before Mom could try to explain further. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring, every red light feeling like a trap. My whole childhood suddenly looked different. Every encouragement, every bedtime story, every "you're so brave." Was it all built on a foundation of manipulation? I pulled over at the park near the river and sat for hours. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom, then from Daniel. I ignored them, staring at the water. And then I remembered something. A fragment. My father's voice that day at the lake. Not cheering, not proud, but angry. Shouting something as hands dragged me onto the dock. I couldn't hear the words, just the sharpness, the fury. Why would he have been angry if I had saved Daniel? The air felt colder suddenly, though it was June.
If Daniel was right, then my parents had been lying for 2 decades. But the question that kept pounding in my skull was, why? Because I was weak? Or because the truth was something much darker? That night, I called Daniel. "I need you to tell me everything," I said. There was a pause. Then his voice, low, uneasy. "Are you sure you want to know?" I clenched the phone tighter. "I have to." He sighed, and when he finally spoke, his words chilled me to the bone. "It wasn't just that you slipped, cousin. There's more. Something your parents never wanted you to find out." My chest tightened. The line buzzed with silence, his hesitations stretching like a rope ready to snap. "What are you talking about?" And then he said it. But before he finished, the call suddenly cut off. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, wondering if Daniel had hung up or if someone else didn't want me to hear the truth. The childhood lie was only the beginning. The phone went dead so abruptly I thought maybe I'd lost signal, but when I tried calling back, it went straight to voicemail. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th attempt, the robotic voice said, "This number has been temporarily disconnected." Disconnected? That didn't make sense. I sat there in my car, my hands shaking around the steering wheel. The world outside blurred with headlights, strangers passing by, their lives intact, while mine was unraveling thread by thread. Why would Daniel cut me off right after saying there was more to the story? I drove back home, my chest tight, my mind running in circles. When I walked into the kitchen, Mom was there, her phone on the counter, her back stiff. Dad sat at the table with his coffee, scrolling through something on his laptop. "You talked to Daniel," Mom said, without turning around. It wasn't a question. "How do you know that?" My voice cracked. Dad closed his laptop slowly, like he was finishing a chapter in a book he already knew the ending to. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Daniel called me first. He said you were drudging up old things. Things better left alone." "That's not true," I snapped. "He said you've been lying to me my whole life." "About the lake." Mom finally turned, her face pale. "You don't understand. You never could." "Then make me understand." My voice rose, louder than I meant it to. Dad's expression shifted, cold steel sliding into place. "What happened that day was complicated. You were a child. Children don't need the truth. They need stability. We gave you that." My hands trembled as I gripped the chair. So Daniel did save me, not the other way around. Silence. Then, Mom whispered, "Yes." I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. But why twist it? Why make me think I was the hero? Dad's voice was calm, too calm. "Because we needed you to believe it. Because if you remembered what really happened, you'd never forgive us." The words hit harder than anything Daniel had said. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked out, his footsteps measured, deliberate. Mom avoided my eyes, her hands busying themselves with wiping an already spotless counter. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of water, sunlight, and that blurred, angry voice. I tossed and turned until finally, at 3 a.m., I pulled out the box of old family photos from the attic. Dust clung to my fingers as I dug through picture after picture. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays. And then I found it. A photo from the lake trip. It was blurry, probably taken in a rush. I was on the dock, soaked and shivering, wrapped in a towel. My hair was plastered to my head, and my lips were blue. Behind me, Mom looked frantic. But what caught my eye was Dad. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was leaning over Daniel, who looked terrified. His hand was gripping Daniel's shoulder, hard. The look on his face wasn't gratitude. It was fury.
Why would my father be angry at the boy who just saved his daughter's life? I stared at the photo until my eyes blurred, my heart thundering in my ears. Something was missing, something I couldn't see but could almost feel pressing against me. The next morning, I drove to Daniel's apartment. His car was in the lot, but when I knocked, no one answered. A neighbor poked her head out, an older woman with curlers in her hair. "You looking for Danny?" she asked. "Yes. Do you know where he is?" Her brow furrowed. "Cops came last night. Took him away in cuffs." My blood ran cold. "What? Why?" She shrugged. "Said something about trespassing at the Thompson property. That's your folks, right?" My throat closed. Daniel had been arrested for being at my parents' house. I drove back home, every red light a torture. When I stormed through the front door, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, like she'd been waiting for me. Dad stood by the window, arms crossed. "Where's Daniel?" I demanded. Mom sighed. "He made poor choices. He's troubled. Always has been. We couldn't let him drag you into his confusion." Confusion. That word again. "You had him arrested?" Dad finally spoke, his voice low and final. "He broke into our shed last night. We caught him trying to steal things." "What things?" Dad's lips pressed into a thin line. "Old boxes. Family stuff. Doesn't matter." It did matter. My gut screamed that it mattered more than anything. I turned on Mom. "What's in the shed?" Her face paled. She opened her mouth, but no words came. That's when I knew. The truth about that day at the lake, the truth about the lie that built my childhood, it was locked inside that shed. And I was going to find it, no matter what it cost. I waited until midnight. The house creaked in its familiar way, pipes rattling, the occasional groan of old wood shifting, but my parents' bedroom door stayed closed. I slipped out of bed, heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would wake them. The shed key was always on Dad's ring, the one he never let out of his sight. But I remembered something from years ago, a loose panel behind the tool bench where I used to hide candy wrappers. Maybe it still worked as an entrance. The night air bit at my skin as I crept across the yard. The shed loomed in the dark, its padlock gleaming under the porch light like a warning. Every instinct told me to turn back, but my chest tightened with the thought of Daniel, arrested because he'd tried to uncover the truth. If he'd risked that much, then I had to go further. I crouched by the side wall, fingers trembling as I felt along the warped wood. There, the panel shifted under my touch. With effort, I pried it open just enough to slip through. My knees scraped against splintered edges, but then I was inside. The air smelled of rust and oil. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the roof, just enough to illuminate stacks of boxes, all neatly labeled in Dad's handwriting. Taxes, 1997 to 2003, Christmas lights, camping gear. But near the back, stacked differently from the rest, were 3 boxes with a single word written across them in thick black marker. Lake. My hands shook. I pulled the top one down. Inside were photographs,
hundreds of them, bundled with rubber bands. Some were water damaged, edges curled. I flipped through the first bundle, my throat tightening. They were all from that summer. Kids on the dock, adults with beers in hand. But in every shot of me, something felt off. I was never smiling. My lips looked purple, my eyes vacant. And then, near the bottom of the pile, a photo made my stomach twist. It was me, sprawled on the dock, unconscious, water dripping off my hair, my chest pale, almost bluish, and Daniel on his knees beside me, pressing his small hands to my chest like he was trying to get me to breathe. I froze. My hands went numb. Another bundle, this time newspaper clippings. Local boy praised for quick thinking after near drowning. Except the boy wasn't me. It was Daniel. His name printed in bold. But the article was cut off halfway. The second half missing.
The third box was heavier. Inside, I found a towel, stiff with age, still stained faintly darker in the middle. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but the smell, faint, metallic, told me what the stain was. Blood. My breath caught. What had happened to me that day? The sound of footsteps on gravel snapped me back to reality. Someone was outside. I shoved the photo back, heart pounding, and crawled toward the panel I'd pried open. But before I reached it, the padlock rattled. Keys jingled. The door creaked. I froze. The silhouette in the doorway filled the space, broad shoulders backlit by porch light. My father. He didn't move at first, just stood there, filling the silence. Then his voice, calm but chilling. I knew you'd come here eventually. My throat dried. You lied to me. We told you the story you needed to hear. That's not lying, that's protecting. Protecting me from what? My voice cracked. His gaze dropped to the open box, to the photo still clutched in my hand. His jaw tightened. Because the truth. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. Finally, I managed. I almost died, didn't I? Dad's face flickered, a storm of emotions. Anger, regret, something darker. Yes. My knees buckled. You weren't breathing when Daniel dragged you out. We thought we'd lost you. He paused, his voice low. And when you woke up, you didn't remember. So we gave you a better story, one that made you strong instead of broken. Tears blurred my vision. That doesn't explain why you're so angry in the photos, why you've hidden all of this. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because what happened that day wasn't an accident. My breath caught. I stared at him, unable to speak, his eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. You weren't supposed to fall in the water. Every nerve in my body went cold. Then what was I supposed to do? I whispered. He didn't answer, just stared at me like the silence itself was the answer. And in that moment, I realized the childhood lie wasn't just about protecting me. It was about hiding something far worse, something my father was still not saying. My father's silence pressed against me like a weight. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't shift. He just watched me as though daring me to push the question again. What do you mean I wasn't supposed to fall in? I whispered. His jaw clenched. You ask too many questions, just like Daniel. The way he said Daniel's name, it wasn't casual, it was venom. You had him arrested because he knew the truth? Daniel doesn't know the truth. He only knows pieces, dangerous pieces.
Pieces like me almost drowning? Pieces like you covering it up? He exhaled slowly, like he was holding back. Go to bed. You've seen enough. I shook my head. My whole body was trembling, but I stood my ground. No. Not until you tell me why. His eyes darkened. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, but then his lips curled into something worse than anger. A smile. Your mother would never forgive me if I told you. Then maybe she's part of it too. The smile vanished.
He grabbed my wrist hard and yanked me toward the door. The photo slipped from my hand, fluttering to the floor. You think you're ready for the truth, but you're not, he growled. His grip dug into my skin until I gasped. Drop it before you destroy what's left of this family. Let me go. The door banged open. Mom stood there in her robe, her hair wild, her face pale. Stop it, she hissed. Her eyes darted to the photo on the ground. For a moment she froze. Then she scooped it up with shaking hands. You shouldn't have seen this, she whispered to me, her voice breaking. Then tell me why, I begged. Tell me why Dad was angry that day, why you lied to me, why you kept all of this locked away. She looked at Dad, her lips trembling. For a second, I thought she might crack. But then she shoved the photo back into the box, slammed the lid shut, and whispered, because you weren't supposed to be there. The words sliced through me. Wasn't supposed to? What does that mean? But she wouldn't answer. She turned to Dad, her voice tight. Take her inside. I ripped my arm free and bolted past them into the night. My lungs burned as I sprinted down the street barefoot, not stopping until I reached the corner store with the flickering neon sign. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, my heart racing so fast I thought it would split. Her words echoed. You weren't supposed to be there. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a number I didn't recognize. My hand shook as I answered. Hello? Static. Then a voice I recognized. Low and panicked. Daniel. Listen to me. I don't have much time. They're watching me. What your dad told you, it's worse than that. He wasn't angry because you fell in. He was angry because... The line crackled violently. I pressed the phone to my ear, desperate. Because what, Daniel? His voice came through, faint, but clear enough to chill my blood. Because someone pushed you. The call cut. The world tilted. Someone pushed me. That's why I fell. That's why I almost died. That's why my father had hidden everything behind a heroic lie. I gripped the phone so hard it hurt, my breath ragged. The pieces started to rearrange themselves, forming a picture I didn't want to see. It wasn't just an accident, it was deliberate, and the person who pushed me was still walking free. Still close. Maybe closer than I realized. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me as I stumbled away from the store, clutching the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Someone pushed you. The words rattled in my skull like broken glass. Every story I'd ever been told, every bedtime reassurance, every proud smile from my parents, it all twisted into something poisonous. I wasn't brave. I wasn't a hero. I was a child shoved into the water, left gasping for life. But who? The obvious suspect burned in my mind like a flare. My father. The anger in that photo, the way he'd grabbed me in the shed, his cold threats. He could have been furious because I'd ruined something he wanted hidden. But then I heard my mom's voice again. You weren't supposed to be there. Was it her? Did she mean the accident wasn't meant for me at all? I couldn't go back home. Not yet. My feet carried me in the only direction I could think of, the police station. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. A bored officer at the desk raised his brows when I walked in barefoot, my hair still damp with night air. You all right, miss? I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain? That my cousin had been arrested for trespassing at my parents' place, that my parents had lied for 2 decades, and that I just learned I was nearly killed as a child? I sounded insane even to myself. I want to see Daniel. The officer frowned. Family? Cousin.
He tapped at the computer. He was booked last night, trespassing and resisting. Can't see him until morning. Please, I whispered. It's important. But he shook his head. Rules are rules. Defeated, I left, but not before asking the time of release, 8 a.m. I memorized it. By the time I reached my car, dawn was breaking. My phone buzzed with messages from Mom. Come home, we need to talk. Then from Dad, if you go to the police, you'll regret it. I turned the phone off. At 7:55, I was parked outside the station. The door opened, and Daniel stepped out, looking exhausted, his wrists still red from cuffs. When he saw me, his eyes widened. You shouldn't be here, he said quickly. They'll know. Daniel, you have to tell me everything, I begged. Who pushed me? He looked around nervously before pulling me into a quiet alley beside the station. His voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't see it directly. I heard a splash, turned, and you were in the water. But when I pulled you out, your father grabbed me. He kept shouting that I'd ruined everything. My chest tightened. Ruined what? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But he wasn't angry that you almost drowned. He was angry you survived. The words knocked the air out of me. He told me if I ever said anything, he'd make sure no one believed me. And he did. He twisted the story, made me out to be the confused kid. Your parents cut me out after that. You remember? I did. Slowly, I realized I hadn't seen Daniel much after that summer. Occasional visits, always strained, Mom always saying, he's troubled, he's not a good influence. What about the shed? I asked. His jaw clenched. There are more photos, more evidence. I was trying to get them, but they caught me. I swallowed hard. Do you think it was him? Dad? He hesitated, then said softly, I think whoever pushed you wanted you gone, and your dad covered it up, maybe to protect himself, maybe to protect someone else. I shook my head, my stomach churning. Someone else? Like Mom? He didn't answer. The silence said enough. Before I could ask more, a black SUV turned the corner, rolling slow, too deliberate. Daniel stiffened. We have to go, now. We sprinted to my car, my hands fumbling with the keys. Tires squealed behind us. Daniel dove into the passenger seat, yelling, Drive! I slammed the gas, heart hammering as the SUV lurched into motion behind us. We tore through back streets, my breath shallow, hands slippery on the wheel. Who are they? I shouted. Daniel's eyes were wide, his voice shaking. Your parents or someone working for them? The SUV kept pace, closing the gap. My mind screamed. The truth about the lake was dangerous enough to bury me again, this time for good. And in that moment, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Whoever pushed me into the water all those years ago wasn't done trying. The SUV's headlights burned in the rearview mirror, blinding, suffocating. My pulse roared in my ears as I swerved down a narrow residential street. Tires screeched, houses blurred. Left, Daniel shouted. I yanked the wheel, nearly clipping a mailbox. The SUV followed effortlessly, its engine growling like a predator stalking prey. Why are they chasing us? I screamed. Because we know too much, and if you find out the rest, they lose everything. The rest. Always more pieces I wasn't seeing. Always half-truths. I gunned the car down a side road that ended at the old mill. Gravel sprayed as I skidded to a stop. The SUV braked hard behind us, blocking the exit. My hands froze on the wheel. We're trapped. Daniel grabbed my arm. Not if we run. We bolted from the car, sprinting toward the trees behind the mill. Branches whipped my face, roots clawed at my ankles, but I didn't stop. My lungs burned, each gasp a reminder of water filling me years ago. The SUV door slammed. Heavy footsteps followed. We didn't stop until we reached the riverbank, the same river that fed into the lake. My legs buckled at the sight of the water glinting in the moonlight. Daniel grabbed my shoulders. Listen, if they catch us, don't let them take you back home. Promise me. What are you talking about? Promise me. His desperation scared me more than the chase. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. We crouched low as the beams of flashlights sliced through the trees. Voices carried, low and urgent. One of them was unmistakable. My father. Check the riverbank. She won't get far. My blood froze. Daniel pulled me deeper into the shadows, pressing a finger to his lips. My father's flashlight beam swept past, so close I could see dust motes dance in the glow. My heart pounded so violently, I was sure it would give us away. The voices moved further down the path. We didn't breathe until they faded into the distance. Daniel finally whispered, "We can't keep running forever. You need to hear the whole truth." I turned to him, shaking. "Then tell me now." He swallowed hard, his face pale in the moonlight. "That day at the lake, your dad wasn't angry at me for saving you. He was angry because I wasn't the one who was supposed to be in the water." My stomach dropped. What? His voice cracked. It was supposed to be me. I stared at him, unable to process the words. "They lured me to the dock that day," he whispered, his hands trembling. "Your dad told me to look for something in the water. I leaned over, and you came running out of nowhere. You weren't supposed to be there. You slipped before anyone could stop you. When I pulled you out, I ruined everything." "No." My head spun. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," Daniel said, his eyes shining with terror. "Because your parents, they needed me gone." The river rushed beside us, black and endless. The truth crashed over me harder than any wave. My family hadn't just lied. They hadn't just twisted a memory. They had planned for someone to die that day. And I was never supposed to know. Branches cracked behind us. Voices grew louder again. Daniel grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the deeper woods. "Wait," I gasped, stumbling. "If they wanted you dead, then why?" He didn't answer. His silence was worse than anything he could have said. Because if the lie was about who saved who, then the real secret was why my parents had wanted to erase Daniel from the picture entirely. We ran until my lungs burned raw, the cold night air scraping down my throat. Branches clawed at us, tearing at my clothes, but Daniel didn't stop pulling me forward until we reached an abandoned hunting cabin hidden in the trees. The windows were shattered, the door half off its hinges. "This'll do," he panted, shoving the door open. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and rot. Old beer cans littered the floor. He dragged a broken chair against the door as if that would keep anyone out. Then he turned to me, his chest heaving. "You need to hear everything," he said, his voice hoarse, his face pale. I hugged myself, shaking. "Start talking, Daniel. No more pieces, no more half-truths. Tell me what they were trying to do that day." His eyes darted to the cracked window, like he expected shallows to press against the glass. Then he swallowed hard. "Your dad wasn't just angry because I saved you. He was angry because I was the target. He wanted me in that water, not you." The words hit like a blow. But why? He sat heavily on the broken chair, rubbing his hands through his hair. Because of the money, the inheritance. My mom, your Aunt Linda, had just finalized a will. You were too young to understand, but she left everything to me. The house, the land, the accounts, everything. Your dad thought it wasn't fair. He thought you deserved it instead. So he made sure I wouldn't be around to claim it. I staggered back, my shoulder hitting the damp wall. My voice cracked. You're saying my dad tried to kill you at 7 years old? Daniel's eyes brimmed with rage and grief. He told me to lean over, said he saw something shiny in the water. I did. Then suddenly I felt hands on my back, but before I could fall, you came running. You bumped into me and you went over instead. My whole body went cold. He pushed me by mistake? Daniel nodded slowly. And when you almost died, he panicked. So he rewrote the story, made you the hero instead of the victim. And Mom, your mom, she played along. She convinced herself it was for your own good. My hands shook so violently I had to clench them into fists. They let me believe I was brave because they needed me to forget I was almost murdered? Daniel's voice dropped lower. Exactly. Silence filled the cabin, heavy and choking. Outside, the woods groaned with the sound of wind and the branches. Finally, I whispered, "Does my mom know?" Daniel's face darkened. She knows enough. She may not have pushed you, but she's kept the secret all these years. And now, they'll do anything to stop it from getting out. That's why they came after me. That's why they're after you. I sank to the floor, my back sliding against the damp wall. The childhood memory I'd carried like a badge of honor had been nothing more than camouflage, a cover-up for attempted murder. But one thought clawed louder than the rest. They can't get away with this. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Then we need proof. The boxes in the shed are just the start. If we can find the missing part of that newspaper article, if we can track down the doctor who treated you, maybe even old police records. A sudden crash cut him off. The cabin door rattled violently. We froze. Another slam, louder. Wood splintered. My chest squeezed as footsteps pounded the porch. Daniel's hand clamped onto mine. His whisper was urgent, fierce. Don't let them take you. The door burst open, wood shards scattering across the floor. And standing there, filling the frame, was my father. His eyes locked on me like a predator sighting prey. "Time to come home," he said. The way he stood there, calm, composed, like breaking down a locked door in the middle of the night was nothing, froze me to the floor. His voice didn't rise, didn't tremble. It was worse than rage. It was certainty. Daniel sprang to his feet, stepping between us. "You're not touching her." Dad's lips curled into the faintest smirk. "Still playing hero, Daniel? Some things never change." My heart thudded painfully. "Why?" I rasped, my throat raw. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why hide it all these years?" His gaze flicked to me, steady, deliberate. Because the truth destroys families. Lies hold them together. That wasn't a lie. That was murder. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe even guilt, but it passed too quickly to pin down. He stepped further inside, the floor creaking beneath his boots. "Dad, stay back," I warned, though my voice broke on the word dad. It felt wrong on my tongue now. Daniel shifted his stance, fists clenched. "You tried to kill me, didn't you?" My father's smirk vanished. For a moment, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. "You were in the way," he said finally. The words dropped like a blade. Daniel stiffened, and I swore the whole cabin tilted sideways with the weight of it. "In the way of what?" I whispered, barely audible. Dad's gaze shifted to me. And this time, the calm broke. His voice snapped, sharp as a whip. Of everything, the land, the money, the future, it should have belonged to us, not to your aunt's sickly little boy. Daniel's fists trembled. She was my mother, and she trusted you. Trust is for fools. Your mother was weak. She handed everything to you like you were some golden child. Do you know what that would have meant for us? For her? He jabbed a finger at me. My stomach twisted. So you decided to kill a child. The room spun, bile rising in my throat. He wasn't denying it anymore. He was justifying it.
You weren't supposed to be there, he said again, his voice low, almost regretful. I didn't mean for you to fall, but when you did, it was an opportunity. We could build a new story, make you stronger, better, a survivor. I staggered back against the wall, tears burning my eyes. You built my whole life on blood. On survival, he snapped. Daniel lunged, his fist connected with Dad's jaw, snapping his head back. The sound cracked through the cabin. Dad staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he wiped the blood from his lip and smiled. Still not strong enough. He charged. The two of them crashed into each other, splintering the broken chair. I screamed, rushing forward, but Daniel shouted, "Run!" I froze, torn, but the sight of my father's hands gripping Daniel's throat snapped me into motion. I grabbed a shard of wood from the wrecked chair and swung with all the strength terror gave me. It cracked against Dad's shoulder. He roared, releasing Daniel, who gasped and shoved him backward. "Go!" Daniel screamed again. But before I could move, Dad regained his footing. His eyes were wild now, no longer composed, no longer calculating, just raw fury. "You think you can escape me?" he growled. He lunged for me faster than I thought possible. His hand closed around my wrist, iron tight, dragging me toward the door. Daniel tackled him from the side, sending us all crashing into the floor. My head smacked the boards, stars exploding in my vision. Through the haze, I heard Dad's voice, guttural, primal. I should have finished it that day. Daniel's voice strained. Not while I'm alive. The two of them grappled, fists and elbows flying. My head rang, my vision blurring. I crawled toward the wall, my hand brushing against something cold, rusted metal, an old fire poker. My fingers closed around it. My heart pounded so loud it drowned everything else. I stood, trembling, raising it above them. For the first time, my father looked afraid. And in that split second, I had to decide whether to carry the truth forward or end it right here with one brutal swing. The fire poker shook in my hands. My father's face was twisted beneath me, one eye swollen from Daniel's punch, his teeth bared in something between a snarl and a plea. Daniel's arm pressed against his throat, holding him down, but I could see he was tiring. "Do it," he hissed. His voice was raw, desperate. "End it before he ends you." My father's gaze locked on mine, and then he smiled. Not the smug smile from before, but a chilling, intimate one. "You won't," he rasped. "You're my daughter." The poker grew heavier. My arms trembled. He was right. I'd never killed anything in my life. I'd grown up on his stories, his rules, his definition of who I was. Could I break all of that with one swing? "Look at you," he croaked, straining against Daniel's hold. Shaking like a scared little girl. "You think you're strong enough to survive without me? Without the story I gave you?" The story. My whole life had been poisoned by it. "I don't need your story anymore," I whispered. And I swung. The poker smashed against the floor an inch from his head, splintering the wood. He flinched. Daniel shoved harder, keeping him pinned.
I dropped the weapon, my chest heaving. "I'm not like you," I spat, "but I will expose you." My father's smile returned, bloody and triumphant. "Expose me to who? Your mother? The police? Everyone already thinks Daniel is the unstable one. We made sure of that years ago." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Not this time." But even as he said it, I felt the weight of truth. My father wasn't wrong. He had power, connections, years of lies layered like armor. Who would believe me over him? I stumbled toward the broken window, the cool night air rushing against my face. "Then we get proof," I said. "The boxes in the shed, the missing article, anything we can find." Dad laughed, a deep, guttural sound. "You think I'd leave evidence lying around?" But his laugh was cut short when Daniel slammed his head back into the floor. "Then you won't mind us checking," Daniel snapped. We bound his hands with an old extension cord we found in the cabin. It wouldn't hold forever, but it bought us time. Daniel wiped the sweat and blood from his brow, his chest heaving. "Come on," he said, grabbing my arm. "We have to move before he breaks loose."
We fled into the woods again, the cabin shrinking behind us. The river whispered at our side, its dark current pulling me back into memories of drowning. Finally, when we reached the road, Daniel slowed. His face was pale in the glow of the moon. "We can't go to the police yet, not until we have something they can't deny." I nodded, though my stomach churned. "The shed." He looked at me. "We go back?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If the truth's anywhere, it's there." We walked in silence for miles, until the silhouette of my house rose in the distance, its windows glowing faintly. Every step closer felt like walking into a graveyard. We crept through the yard, sticking to the shadows. The shed loomed like a black tooth against the night sky. My chest tightened as I pulled at the loose panel again. The wood groaned, then gave. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Daniel closed the panel behind us, leaving only the sliver of moonlight through the roof crack. I pulled out the boxes again. My hands shook as I dug deeper this time, pushing past the photographs and clippings I'd already seen. At the very bottom of the second box, taped to the underside of the cardboard, I found it. Half a newspaper article. The missing piece. I peeled the tape away carefully and unfolded it. The headline sent ice through my veins. "Local boy's heroism erased after family testimony disputes report." The article described how Daniel had been praised for saving me, until my parents stepped forward with a different version. They claimed I had pulled him from the water, that witnesses were mistaken. They'd convinced the paper to run a correction, burying the original story. And in the margin, scrawled in my mother's handwriting, was a note: "Keep this hidden." My breath caught. "Daniel, this is it." He stared at the paper, his jaw tight. "It's not enough. We need more than words." I dug into the third box, pulling out medical forms, doctor's notes. One stood out. An ER report, dated the day of the incident. It listed me as the patient. Symptoms: unconscious, hypothermia, water inhalation, possible head trauma. My knees buckled. They'd erased me from my own hospital record by hiding this. Daniel's hand gripped my shoulder. "Now we have them." But before I could answer, a sound split the silence. The click of the shed door unlocking. The padlock hit the ground with a dull thud. We weren't alone. The sound of the lock dropping echoed like a gunshot in the small shed. Daniel's eyes snapped to mine, wide and frantic. I stuffed the ER report and the newspaper clipping into my jacket just as the hinges groaned. The door opened. A sliver of light cut through the darkness, stretching across the boxes, across my hands. And then a shadow filled the doorway.
Sweetheart, my mother's voice came, soft, trembling. Please, come out. Not Dad. Mom. For a second, I almost stepped forward. Her silhouette looked small, fragile against the porch light spilling behind her. She wasn't the monster. She wasn't the one who tried to kill Daniel. Maybe she didn't know everything. Maybe she'd finally broken. But then I remembered her words in the kitchen. You weren't supposed to be there. My blood went cold. Daniel tensed beside me, his hand inching toward a rusted wrench on the workbench. Don't, I whispered. Mom took a small step inside. Her voice cracked, but her words were deliberate. I know what you found. It doesn't change anything. It only makes everything worse. Worse for who? My voice shook. For you? For him? Or for me, living a lie for 20 years? Her breath hitched. You were too young to understand. We needed you to be strong. If you knew the truth, you'd have crumbled. I pulled the papers from my jacket, my hands trembling. You buried medical reports. You rewrote history. You protected him. Her silhouette stiffened. I protected us. Daniel stepped forward, his voice sharp. You protected a murderer. Her head turned toward him slowly. For a moment, the softness dropped from her voice. Stay out of this, Daniel. You've always been trouble. Even your mother knew it. His fists clenched. Don't you dare talk about her. The tension crackled so thick, it felt like the air itself would snap. My pulse hammered in my throat as I forced the words out.
Who pushed me? The silence stretched. My mother's shoulders rose and fell with a shaky breath. Then she whispered, It doesn't matter. It matters to me, I shot back. Her voice hardened, brittle as glass. It was me. The words hit me harder than the night of the drowning itself. Daniel staggered back. I felt the papers slip in my grip, fluttering to the floor. You? My voice broke. It wasn't Dad? She stepped fully into the shed now, her face pale in the moonlight streaming through the roof. Her eyes brimmed with something like sorrow, but her jaw was tight, her mouth trembling. I only meant to scare him, she whispered, glancing at Daniel. Your father told me it would solve everything. I just had to push. I didn't know you'd run in. I didn't know you'd... Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to be you. The shed spun around me. My stomach lurched, bile rising. You tried to kill a child? I was desperate, she cried, her voice breaking into sobs. We had nothing. Your father said we'd lose the house, lose everything. Daniel's inheritance meant survival. For him, not us. I thought... She clutched her chest, shaking. I thought one push would save us all. Daniel's voice was low, trembling with fury. You tried to drown me like garbage, and you let her, he jabbed a finger at me, grow up worshipping you for it. Her sobbing twisted into something harsher, something unhinged. We gave her strength. We gave her a story. She was brave because of us. I stepped back until my spine hit the wall. My breath came in gasps. The woman I'd called Mom for 25 years, the woman who tucked me in at night, who kissed my forehead when I was sick, had shoved me into the water. And Dad had helped bury it. Daniel moved first. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the panel in the wall. We're done here, he hissed. Mom lunged forward, her hand outstretched. Wait, if you leave, if you tell, everything falls apart. Good, Daniel spat. We shoved the panel open and crawled out into the cold night, the boxes rattling behind us.
Mom's sobs turned into screams, muffled as we sprinted across the yard, hearts hammering like war drums. At the edge of the trees, I turned back once. She stood framed in the doorway, her face a ruin of tears and rage, her body shaking. "You'll destroy this family," she cried into the night. I stared at her through the darkness, my chest raw, my voice shaking as I whispered words I never thought I'd say. "You already did." Daniel tugged my arm, pulling me deeper into the woods. Behind us, the shed light flickered once, then went out. And I knew, without question, there was no going back. We ran until the glow of the house disappeared completely, swallowed by the trees. My legs ached, my chest burned, but I didn't stop. The night was thick and silent except for our ragged breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Finally, when the woods thinned, Daniel slowed. We collapsed by the side of the road, both of us gasping, the adrenaline draining from our bodies. For a while, neither of us spoke. My mind kept replaying her voice. It was me. Every syllable carved deeper. My own mother, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had tried to end a boy's life. My life, by mistake. She admitted it, Daniel finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "That's all the proof we need. We go to the police tonight." But doubt slammed into me like a wave. And say what? That my mom confessed in a dark shed with no witnesses? That she admitted she pushed me 20 years ago because of money? Who's going to believe us? Daniel's jaw tightened. "We have the ER report, the article. It's enough to open an investigation." I pulled the papers from my jacket, staring at the faded ink. The words blurred through my tears. It felt like trying to fight a monster with a paper sword. "They'll twist it," I said. "They'll say you made it up, that I imagined it, that Mom's just protecting me from trauma. And Dad, he'll always make sure they believe him. He always does." Daniel's silence told me he knew I was right.
The road stretched before us, empty, endless. My hands shook as I shoved the papers back into my jacket. Then we need something bigger, something they can't bury. What? I swallowed. A recording. A confession. We get her to say it again, on tape. Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. Risky, but it might be the only way. We walked along the road until we found a motel, the kind with buzzing neon and peeling paint. The night clerk barely looked at us as Daniel handed over cash. The room smelled of cigarettes and mildew, but it was safe. For now. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands still trembling. "I keep thinking about it," I whispered. "What if I hadn't run to the dock that day? What if she pushed you instead of me?" Daniel sat across from me, his eyes dark. Then I'd be led, and you'd still be living the lie. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the scar on my wrist from where Dad had grabbed me in the shed, the bruise already blooming. My body shook with fury and grief. They stole my childhood. They made me believe I was strong because of something I never did. They made me thank them for it. They made me love them for it. Daniel's voice softened. Then let's make sure no one else ever believes their lies again. We didn't sleep that night. We planned. Tomorrow we'd go back, not to the house, but to my mother, alone. We'd get her to talk, to admit everything where she couldn't spin it away. At dawn, I stood at the cracked motel sink, splashing water on my face. My reflection looked like a stranger, hollow eyes, hair matted, a girl stripped of every story she thought she knew. A knock at the door made me jump. Daniel tensed, motioning me back. He peered through the peephole, then relaxed. "It's just the clerk. Probably the bill." He opened the door. But it wasn't the clerk. It was Dad. His face was calm,
almost gentle, but his eyes burned. And behind him, two men in dark jackets, broad-shouldered, their expressions flat. Daniel slammed the door shut, but Dad's voice cut through the thin wood. "Sweetheart, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Come home. We can fix this." My body froze, terror anchoring me in place. Daniel bolted the lock, his face pale. "We're out of time," he whispered. The men outside started pounding, the frame shaking with every hit. The walls felt like they were closing in. My father's voice grew louder, sharper. "You don't understand what you're doing. You'll ruin us all." His words twisted through me, familiar, poisonous. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if us still included me. The pounding rattled the thin motel walls, each thud like a countdown to disaster. Dust sprinkled from the doorframe, the bolt groaning against its socket. Daniel pressed his back against the door, his fists white-knuckled. "They'll break it down any second," he whispered. I stood frozen by the bed, my mind screaming for escape. My father's voice cut through the chaos, louder now, every syllable deliberate. "You're my daughter, my blood. Do you really think you can run from that?" Something in me cracked. "You tried to kill me," I shouted back, my voice shaking. "You let me live a lie." Silence. Then, almost gently, "No, sweetheart, I saved you. Without me, you would have drowned. Don't you see? I gave you a life worth living." The words slithered into me, cold and suffocating. Even now, he was rewriting the story, trying to twist the truth until it bent around his will. The doorframe splintered. One more hit, and it would give. Daniel spun toward me, frantic. "We need proof, now. If they take us, it's over." My hands fumbled through the nightstand. A Bible, a pen, nothing useful. Until my fingers closed around a cheap digital alarm clock radio with a built-in recorder. My pulse spiked. "Here," I hissed, flipping the tiny switch. The red light glowed faintly. Daniel's eyes met mine. He nodded once. Then he called out, voice mocking, "Go on, Mr. Family Man. Tell her again how you tried to drown a kid for money." The pounding stopped. A silence heavier than stone fell. Then my father's voice, low and venomous. "Daniel was supposed to go into that water, not her. You ruined everything when you dragged her out." My heart slammed against my ribs. It was there, on tape, the admission. Daniel's eyes widened. For a heartbeat, hope flickered. But then the bolt snapped. The door flew open, wood cracking like a bone. The two men stormed in first, broad shoulders filling the doorway. My father followed, his face flushed with fury. Daniel lunged at one of them, landing a wild punch. The man barely flinched before throwing him against the wall with a sickening thud. Daniel crumpled, groaning. I screamed, clutching the recorder to my chest. My father's gaze locked on it instantly. "What's that?" His voice was sharp, dangerous. I backed away, my spine hitting the peeling wallpaper. "Proof," I whispered, though my voice cracked. "Proof of what you did." For the first time, real fear flickered across his face. He took a slow step toward me. "Give it to me, and we can end this. No one ever has to know. You'll come home, and we'll pretend this never happened." "No." My voice trembled, but the word stood. "You don't get to write my story anymore." The men moved closer, closing me in. My father's eyes burned with desperation. "Sweetheart, if that gets out, we lose everything. You lose everything." Tears blurred my vision. "Then, maybe we should." I hurled the recorder toward the open window. It smashed through the glass, vanishing into the night. Dad's face twisted, rage boiling over. "What have you done?" he roared. The men lunged, but I was already moving, diving past them toward Daniel. He staggered up, dazed but alive. We bolted for the bathroom, slamming the door and locking it as the heavy footsteps closed in. The recorder was gone, out there in the dark, maybe broken, maybe not. Maybe someone would find it, maybe no one ever would. But for the first time, my father couldn't erase what I'd heard with my own ears. And I knew, with terrifying certainty, that he would stop at nothing to make sure no one else heard it either. The bathroom door shook under their pounding, the mirror rattling on the wall. Each slam made my chest jolt like a hammer against bone. Daniel leaned against the sink, blood trickling from his forehead, his breath ragged. "They'll break it down in seconds," he whispered. I gripped the rusted towel rack, my mind racing. There was no way out except the tiny frosted window above the tub. My pulse surged. The window. He followed my gaze, his face pale. "It's too small. It has to be enough." I snapped, shoving the lid off the toilet tank and climbing onto it. My fingers fumbled at the latch, my nails scraping glass. Behind us, the door cracked, splinters flying. "Go," he urged. I shoved the window open, icy night air slapping my face. "You first." He hesitated, then hauled himself up, twisting his shoulders until he squeezed through. His body vanished into the night with a grunt and a thud. The door groaned, a jagged hole splintering near the knob. I hoisted myself up, my legs trembling, but before I could wriggle out, the door burst open. My father's silhouette filled the frame. "Stop!" he barked, his voice thunderous. I froze, half in and half out of the window. His eyes locked on mine, wild and furious, but there was something else behind them. Fear. "Don't do this," he growled. "You're my daughter. Don't make me—" He stopped himself, his jaw tightening. "Make you what? Finish what you started at the lake?" His face twisted, rage and shame colliding. He lunged forward, grabbing my ankle just as Daniel's hands clamped around my wrists from outside. For a breathless second, I was suspended between them. My father's grip like iron, Daniel's pulling me toward freedom. "Let go of her!" Daniel roared. My father's voice cracked, raw and guttural. "She's mine." Tears blurred my eyes. In that moment, I felt the weight of every lie, every stolen memory, every bruise hidden under long sleeves. And I realized he was right about one thing. He was mine. His story, his scapegoat, his mistake. But not anymore. With every ounce of strength I had, I kicked, slamming my free foot into his chest. His grip slipped. His eyes widened in shock, betrayal. Then Daniel yanked, and I tumbled through the window, crashing into the gravel outside. We didn't stop. We ran barefoot into the night, the motel's neon glow shrinking behind us. My lungs burned, my throat raw, but adrenaline pushed me forward.
Only when we reached the highway did we slow, collapsing in the ditch, both of us gasping. Daniel turned to me, his eyes searching. "The recorder. Do you think it survived?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure. "It has to." Headlights appeared in the distance. A car slowed, a window rolling down. A middle-aged woman leaned out, her eyes widening at the sight of us. Two bloodied, barefoot fugitives in the ditch. "Are you kids okay?" she asked, her voice cautious. I forced myself to stand, my body trembling. "Please," I begged. "Call the police. Tell them Officer Thompson tried to kill his daughter. Tell them we have proof." Her expression shifted at the name. Recognition. Hesitation. But she nodded slowly, pulling out her phone. As she dialed, I looked back at the dark stretch of road behind us. No sign of the SUV. No sign of my father. But I knew he wasn't gone. He was out there, somewhere, in the night, furious, desperate, and hunting for the one thing he couldn't control anymore: the truth. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, I've got 2 young people here. They need help. They said it's about Officer Thompson." She darted her eyes to me, searching for confirmation. I nodded, though bile rose in my throat at hearing his name spoken like that. So ordinary, so respectable, when all I could see was the monster behind it. Daniel clutched my arm. "We can't stay here. If he's got men watching, they'll know we called." The woman covered the receiver. "There's a diner up the road. Stay there. Lots of people around. Safer." We thanked her and started walking fast, gravel biting our bare feet, dawn just beginning to gray the horizon. My body ached, but adrenaline kept me moving. At the diner, the smell of coffee and frying bacon hit like a wave of normal life, cruel in its simplicity. We slid into a booth near the back. Daniel ordered nothing. I wrapped my hands around a mug of black coffee, though I couldn't drink it. My whole body was shaking. "They'll try to spin it," he muttered. "Your dad's respected. He's been on the force for years. They'll paint us as liars, runaways." "We have his words," I interrupted, though doubt gnawed at me. "If the recorder survived." His gaze met mine. "If." The door jingled open. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, scanning the room. My stomach clenched. For a split second, I thought Dad had gotten to them already, but when one of them approached our booth, his expression wasn't hostile. It was wary. "You're the ones who made the call?" he asked, quietly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He slid into the booth across from us. "We know Thompson. He's a decorated officer. If what you're saying is true, it's serious. You have evidence?" Daniel placed the folded ER report and newspaper clipping on the table. The officer scanned them, his brows furrowing. It's something, but it won't be enough." "Then listen to the tape," I blurted. "He admitted it, that Daniel was supposed to go into that water, not her." The officer's head jerked up. "You recorded him?" "Yes, but I threw it out the window when they broke in, somewhere near the motel." He stood, motioning to his partner. "We'll get a team to search. In the meantime, you 2 need protection." Protection. The word almost made me laugh. Could anyone really protect us from him? Hours crawled by in a blur of paperwork, questioning, whispered conversations. They placed us in a safe house outside town, a bare apartment with drawn blinds and a constant hum of police radios. Daniel paced like a caged animal. I sat on the mattress, staring at my hands. And then, 2 knocks at the door. A code phrase exchanged. An officer entered, holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was the recorder. My heart stopped. "It's damaged, but we managed to pull something." He set a laptop on the table, pressed play. Static hissed. Then, faint but clear, my father's voice filled the room. "Daniel was supposed to go into that water, not her. You ruined everything when you dragged her out." The words stabbed through me, raw all over again. But this time, they weren't mine alone to carry. They were evidence. The officer closed the laptop. "This changes everything. Thompson will be suspended pending investigation. With this and the records, there's a case." Relief and terror collided inside me, because I knew what came next. If Dad realized the tape survived, he would fight harder. That night, lying on the thin, safe house mattress, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the lake in my mind. The splash, the burn in my chest, the hands dragging me up. I had lived 2 lives, one built on a lie, one on a truth too ugly to face, and now both were colliding. In the silence, Daniel whispered from across the room, "Do you think this ends him?" I swallowed hard. "Or it ends us." And in the dark, I wasn't sure which it would be. Morning light seeped through the blinds of the safe house, thin and gray, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Daniel sat by the window, his eyes bloodshot, staring out as though my father to come storming in at any second. I wanted to believe we were safe now, that the tape and the ER report were enough, but a sick feeling gnawed at me. My father wasn't the type to sit back and wait for justice. He was the type to erase problems before they could speak. The knock on the door made me flinch so hard I spilled the cup of lukewarm coffee in my hands. "Police," a voice called. Daniel moved first, checking the peephole. Relief washed over his face. "It's them!" The officers from last night stepped in, their expressions grim. One of them set a table on the folder. The recorder sealed it. Thompson suspended. Internal Affairs is opening an inquiry. There'll be charges. It's moving fast. For the first time in days, I exhaled. My shoulders sagged under the weight of it. But the officer's eyes didn't soften. "There's something else," he added. He slid a document across the table. "We did some digging into the inheritance, your aunt's estate. Turns out your parents had petitioned for guardianship over you and Daniel, in case something happened to his mother. If Daniel had died back then, everything would have transferred to them." The words landed like a blade twisting in my chest. It wasn't just greed. It was planned, calculated. Daniel cursed under his breath, slamming his fist into the wall. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. My mother's handwriting flashed in my mind. "Keep this hidden." The officer leaned forward. "We'll need both of you to testify. Without you, it's just documents. Your words matter." The thought of standing in a courtroom, facing my father's eyes as I spoke the truth, it froze me. But then I saw Daniel, his face lined with scars of years I hadn't lived with him, years stolen by their lies. I nodded. "I'll do it." The officers left us with promises of patrol cars nearby. Still, as night fell, the safe house walls felt paper thin. Every creak made my heart race. Sleep wouldn't come. I wandered into the tiny kitchen, sipping stale water. Daniel joined me, leaning on the counter. His voice was low, almost broken. "I keep thinking about what she said, that you weren't supposed to be there, that it was meant for me. If you hadn't run to the dock—" "Stop," I cut him off. My voice was sharp, but my chest ached. "If we keep playing what if, we'll go insane. They tried to kill you, Daniel. That's the truth. And they almost killed me instead." He looked at me, his jaw tight, then nodded. A sudden bang jolted us both. Not at the door, at the back window. We froze. Another bang. The window rattled in its frame. Daniel grabbed a kitchen knife, his knuckles white. I clutched my phone, fingers fumbling to dial the number the officers had given us. But before I could hit call, a shadow moved across the window. And then, his voice. Calm. Cold. Familiar. "You can't hide forever." My blood turned to ice. My father. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. Daniel braced himself, knife raised. The glass shattered inward, shards spraying across the counter. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Not until one of us was gone. Relief and terror collided inside me, because I knew what came next. If Dad realized the tape survived, he would fight harder. That night, lying on the thin, safe house mattress, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the lake in my mind. The splash, the burn in my chest, the hands dragging me up. I had lived two lives, one built on a lie, one on a truth too ugly to face. And now, both were colliding. In the silence, Daniel whispered from across the room, "Do you think this ends him?" I swallowed hard. Or it ends us. And in the dark, I wasn't sure which it would be. Morning light seeped through the blinds of the safe house, thin and gray, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Daniel sat by the window, his eyes bloodshot, staring out as though my father to come storming in at any second. I wanted to believe we were safe now, that the tape and the ER report were enough, but a sick feeling gnawed at me. My father wasn't the type to sit back and wait for justice. He was the type to erase problems before they could speak. The knock on the door made me flinch so hard I spilled the cup of lukewarm coffee in my hands. "Police," a voice called. Daniel moved first, checking the peephole. Relief washed over his face. "It's them." The officers from last night stepped in, their expressions grim. One of them set a table on the folder. The recorder sealed it. Thompson suspended. Internal Affairs is opening an inquiry. There'll be charges. It's moving fast. For the first time in days, I exhaled. My shoulders sagged under the weight of it. But the officer's eyes didn't soften. "There's something else," he added. He slid a document across the table. "We did some digging into the inheritance, your aunt's estate. Turns out your parents had petitioned for guardianship over you and Daniel, in case something happened to his mother. If Daniel had died back then, everything would have transferred to them." The words landed like a blade twisting in my chest. It wasn't just greed. It was planned, calculated. Daniel cursed under his breath, slamming his fist into the wall. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. My mother's handwriting flashed in my mind. "Keep this hidden." The officer leaned forward. "We'll need both of you to testify. Without you, it's just documents. Your words matter." The thought of standing in a courtroom, facing my father's eyes as I spoke the truth, it froze me. But then I saw Daniel, his face lined with scars of years I hadn't lived with him, years stolen by their lies. I nodded. "I'll do it." The officers left us with promises of patrol cars nearby. Still, as night fell, the safe house walls felt paper thin. Every creak made my heart race. Sleep wouldn't come. I wandered into the tiny kitchen, sipping stale water. Daniel joined me, leaning on the counter. His voice was low, almost broken. "I keep thinking about what she said, that you weren't supposed to be there, that it was meant for me. If you hadn't run to the dock—" "Stop," I cut him off. My voice was sharp, but my chest ached. "If we keep playing what if, we'll go insane. They tried to kill you, Daniel. That's the truth. And they almost killed me instead." He looked at me, his jaw tight, then nodded. A sudden bang jolted us both. Not at the door, at the back window. We froze. Another bang. The window rattled in its frame. Daniel grabbed a kitchen knife, his knuckles white. I clutched my phone, fingers fumbling to dial the number the officers had given us. But before I could hit call, a shadow moved across the window. And then, his voice. Calm. Cold. Familiar. "You can't hide forever." My blood turned to ice. My father. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. Daniel braced himself, knife raised. The glass shattered inward, shards spraying across the counter. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Not until one of us was gone.